Hoper, it was an opportunity for us to be in the great north, the peaceful and tranquil north, as Don Cameron always used to talk about, the hospitality that you get when you are in the north, and of course the soup ladies in the Sioux. Not to be confused with soup Nazis. Nope, that was Seinfeld's and Seinfeld's alone. These are just the soup ladies when you pay a visit to the Sioux.
Yeah, but Muyo's isn't there anymore.
I know. A
So
pandemic
what's the point of going?
casualty. It's terrible.
What's the point of going?
I know.
Move the
I feel
team.
you. I feel right. Get them to another city
Yep.
where another Italian restaurant like Muio's can cater the media room food.
It's a nice city though, up in the Sioux. I do like it. Someone asked me about the Sioux today. What's it like there? I've never been. I said, it's beautiful. It's on the water. It's industrial on the water. There really isn't like a downtown core, at least not that we've seen anyway. But it's major Greyhound country, which I like.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that too. I think it's one of those junior hockey markets that, when you're there, you feel it. The Greyhounds are the game in town. Remember when we were there during the playoffs a few years back, and every store in the downtown, such as the downtown is, but was plastered with Greyhound signage. It looked great. The entire city was Sioux Greyhound crazy at the time.
They were, and I think they're always Sioux Greyhound crazy, but when you make it to the Western Conference final like that, it was taken to another level. And it was really cool to be able to see a city that shows so much support to their team, through all 68 regular season games every year, to see the support they had for them when, they're one win away from the OHL final. It was really cool to see. And I loved it. All the businesses with signs in the windows. I remember questioning where Kitchener's businesses were. Why isn't it draped in Rangers colors? This is a big moment heading up there for Game 7 at that time. I just loved the city. You couldn't look anywhere without seeing a red and white Greyhound sign. It was awesome.
I might say, and I don't know if I did then, but my first reaction to that comment now, where was Kitchener at the time when the Sioux was plastered in Sioux Greyhound signage? Kitchener might be a little too cool for that sort of thing now. I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be hypercritical, but you look at the makeup of the Sioux and that blue collar town and the junior hockey market that it is. Make no mistake, Kitchener's a great junior hockey market, but you don't get that same sense in the city at large like you do in the rink when the game is happening, if that makes any sense.
It does. I also think there's, unlike the Sioux, with all due respect, there's more things to do around Kitchener.
Sure.
There's more ways to spend your money. There's the arts community, there's the tech community, all that kind of thing. Whereas, I think the minority of people are Rangers fans in Kitchener. It's a great hockey city, but just because of pure populace alone, that in the Sioux, it's like, 95% of our population is a Greyhounds fan.
Good point. And you got, even on the sports scene, lots of great junior B, GOJHL in the region of Waterloo and all those other things you mentioned. Since this podcast is called OHL Stories, I just want to share one really quick. I can't go to the Sioux, which we did this week, without thinking about this story. And you actually mentioned it during our broadcast between periods last weekend, Chris, when we were in Guelph, not on the air, but you said, we got to get just a whole bunch of Don Cameron stories to share, bring somebody on to talk about those. And I said to you then, and I've said before, I feel bad that my memory is as bad as it is, or I wasn't really listening to every word. We had lots of great years and long nights in hotel rooms after road trips or on road trips where we just drink beer and he would talk and I would listen. I wish I remembered all of the details, but we would talk about, when Montreal was in the league and a variety of other things that I was telling you about. But one story that sticks out vividly for me was one of our first trips to the Sioux. So we already made mention of the soup ladies, and they are the sweetest older ladies that are in the media room in Sault Ste. Marie. They manage the media room. So when you go in to get your pregame meal and your drinks and your lineups and all of that other stuff, they are in there to make sure everything is running along just smoothly and that you are well looked after while you're in the Sioux. And so the minute really you walk in the door to that media room, they ask you if you want to have some soup. Well, I guess a couple of things happen. One is you go up there enough times like Don did, and eventually the question wears a little thin. And another point to it is sometimes that soup can be make you sweat, spicy, hot soup. So Don just, I think, always felt bad saying no, because he never, in my time with him, got the soup. And our first time, he had told me about this on our trip up to the Sioux, and that wily veteran, the first time we went into that arena together and went to that media room, he went through the door first and took as quick a right as a man his age could ever take, like he was a left winger. And he'd be off to the side. And all of a sudden, I'm face to face with the soup ladies. You want some soup? And I was the one that had to turn them down because I didn't want any soup. Anyway, that's my Don Cameron story from the soup.
You don't even get the door fully open in that
No way.
rink before they're asking you. Like, you're pulling the door open. Soup? Sure. And the thing that bothers me, though, they won't allow me to get the soup myself. They don't have to serve me.
They
I'm
bring
like,
it
here,
right
I'll
to
just
your
take
table.
it. And they're like, no, we'll bring it to your table. I'm like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
I'm very capable of carrying this hot bowl of soup myself. I'm scared they're going to fall and get scarred by this hot soup just because I wanted a bowl of chicken noodle. I feel bad.
So the calm and tranquil north, the hospitality that we receive while we are visiting, those are sort of the off-ice escapades this week on OHL Stories. But really the story around the league is what happened about a week ago, last weekend in Owen Sound. No, pardon me, it was in London. But Knights attack Mark Woolley, heading back towards the end boards on an icing. And no sooner does the whistle get blown to say icing has been called, and Woolley might stand up a little straighter, let up just a little bit, and he gets a little cross check in the lower back from Brody Crane. Hard into the end boards goes Woolley. And I'll say again, Chris, I think you put this best on Twitter when you first reacted to it, and that is, it's the kind of play that has to get out of this game, this level, pro level, out of the game period.
Yeah, any cross check at that point, any push, just has no place in the game. It's a dirty play. There's no reason for it whatsoever. It is an intent to injure, because Mark Woolley was standing straight up, kind of gliding, getting ready to turn around the net because the whistle had already went. It was icing. He clearly won the race and then gets cross-checked. And when you're standing up like that and you get cross-checked in the lower back, your feet automatically go forward and come out from under you. And Woolley was turning to go around the net and his feet came out and he went sliding into the boards. Who knows how long he'll be out for? I'm just glad he wasn't seriously injured, because I said to you the other day, that's how someone dies. Like, you cross-check someone like that, they go headfirst into the boards, they could break their neck. Like, it's such a dirty play, and one that just has no place in the Ontario Hockey League and hockey altogether. That's why they took out the race to the end line for icing, because you don't want guys being intertwined with each other and then someone slips and goes into the end boards. And that was just like the whistle had already went. That was the thing to me. It wasn't like he was trying to push him out of the way or something like that. They weren't even close. It was a cross check after, right to the lower back, which is going to send your feet out. No parent wants to see their kid be taken out like that. And no parent, I think, wants to see their kid make that play. It's like, I put it in comparison to basketball. Like, when someone's going up for a layup, you don't push them, because if you push them, their feet are going to go out and they're going to land on their head. Like, you just don't do it. There's no reason for it whatsoever. And as soon as I saw that play develop and I was watching it, and I'm like, he still hasn't cross-checked him. He still hasn't cross-checked him. Oh my gosh, how late is this going to be? And then, like, how close to the boards are they going to be? And then you see it, and you just, like, I just hung my head. I'm like, what are you thinking? And I know that tempers run high and testosterone in teenagers and all that kind of stuff. No excuses, none.
Yeah, you talk about the serious injury that can result. And of course, Pat Peake famously or infamously, as a member of the Washington Capitals, shattered his heel on such a play. And it was one of several key injuries that led to the very premature ending to Pat Peake's pro hockey career. But that was before the new rule, like long before. This is decades ago. That's why these rules now exist like they do. And so, to your point, Chris, you're watching it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it still hasn't happened. It still hasn't happened. There it is. I'm not going to put intentions into this young man's mind. I have no idea. Your point's well taken that, this is a highly charged, emotional, physical game, but why you disrespect an opponent to that level, to that extent, is something I do have a really hard time with.
I don't think it was, I said it was an intent to injure, and I shouldn't have said that, because I don't think there was intent behind it. I really just think it was, London and Owen Sound, they see each other all the time, a Western Conference rival or a divisional rival. I'm sure it was just, I'm just going to cross-check this guy, let him know I'm here kind of thing. Send him, hopefully get a retaliatory penalty on Owen Sound's captain and top defenseman. I'm sure that's all it was. But it's a dangerous play. You have to realize that that's not a play that belongs in the game, and you wouldn't want it done to you, so you shouldn't do it to someone else, quite simply.
It takes me back, Chris, to something that you and I heard in one of our post-game shows early in the season. In fact, it was the first weekend, game 2. And I don't want to get all Don Cherry on you here, but
please don't.
Exactly, for obvious reasons. But it does make me curious. So the post-game I'm referring to, the show, was an interview you did with Arbor Jackeye after the Rangers came from behind to beat the Guelph Storm in their second game of the season. And Jackeye had run amok a little bit in the game, took some undisciplined penalties. The Rangers were able to rally, come back after taking his undisciplined double minor. Jackeye was a model citizen the rest of the game. But in talking to him after the game, he said to you that there's nobody on that Storm team that wants to fight him. In the league, the Arbor Jackeyes are becoming fewer and further between, because Jackeye, certainly up until signing his pro contract, I won't say is one-dimensional, but a guy that was never shy about mixing it up. And you don't see a lot of guys in the OHL doing that anymore, and for good reason. But I wonder if we hadn't swung the pendulum so far away from fighting in the game and letting the players police themselves, if a play like the play that we're just talking about in London happens at all. I don't know. Again, I know that's very Don Cherry-esque.
Yeah, I'm kind of flip-flopping here, and I'm trying to figure out where I stand, but I don't, like, back in the day, would that play have happened? Probably, but it just would have meant a line brawl right after.
Sure.
Right? Like, that play did happen back in the day. You talked about it with Pat Peake. But the new rules, and as we learn to grow with this game, that play has no place in it. And that's what it is. Will he have to answer for it? Mark Woolley's probably going to make him answer for it. Let's call a spade a spade. Mark Woolley is no shrinking violet. When it comes to Arbor's comments, he's right. A lot of teams in the OHL don't have a guy that likes to fight the way Arbor does. He likes, I've said it before, I think he'd drop the gloves every game if he could. I think he enjoys it. Sickeningly, maybe. But he plays that physical style. And I said it on the broadcast the other day. I think he plays bigger against teams that don't have a guy that he might have to answer to, because he knows, we call him, like, I am the sheriff out here. No one is going to do anything if I'm out here, because nobody wants to come near me. And we saw that against Guelph. Even the most recent game in Guelph, where he basically went chasing after players. Undisciplined, yes. The game was probably out of reach by that point, but still.
But I wonder if that isn't a wee bit of a problem too, simply because the way Arbor Jackeye's game has developed, and you and I have talked about it on this podcast, from free agent invitee to training camp with the Kitchener Rangers to free agent signing a pro contract with the Montreal Canadiens. Arbor Jackeye is so much more useful and so much more valuable on the ice, being a good defenseman. And he is, make no mistake, he's a very good defenseman in the Ontario Hockey League right now. There are 19 other teams that would line up to have him, and probably have him in their top pairing. So, doing what he did, chasing guys around the ice and horse collaring them down like he did last Sunday, is not something I think you can give a long leash to in Kitchener.
No, but I don't think he has a long leash. And yes, this is, a little Kitchener centric, but we're talking about the style of player that he is. And you brought up, he's a good defenseman, tied for third right now in the OHL in plus minus. So he's obviously a benefit to the team when he's on the ice, but he's tied for first in penalty minutes. But
what does that tell you?
Well, exactly. But then you look at it, if you break it down, I look at it as just that one game, because he got that 10-minute. So that drops him from 20 to 10 minutes right away. And he had 2 double minors in Guelph. So that's 8 minutes. So you take the Storm out of the equation and he's fine.
So just let him play the other 8 teams in the Western Conference.
Seriously, though, like, when you think about it like that, and yes, does he need to be a little more, does he need to pick his spots a little bit? Sure. And do you like to see him, take a 10-minute there? No. I guess the 10-minute, for whatever reason, it didn't show up. So they only gave him 6 minutes against Guelph. So I take that away. He had what, 6?
It was definitely
10,
announced
16?
as a 10.
Yeah. So he has 18 of his 20 minutes against Guelph this season. He didn't take a penalty against Sarnia, and he took one against Windsor. It's about picking your spots. And I think that's part of his game. He needs to be that aggressive sometimes to just send a reminder, because if no one's going to fight him, how does he send that reminder? He got blatantly cross-checked from Brandon Bowman below the goal line. Bowman came down, retaliatory cross-check after Arbor laid a hit, and then Bowman took off. I'd take off too, but you took your shot and you're going to run away. Well, I'm going to run after you, and I'm going to let you know that you're not taking that shot on me. I think you have to do that to a certain extent.
More broadly, what this gets around to, and the conversation I really meant to have with you after those comments a couple of weeks ago, is where we're at in the game of hockey, but specific to junior hockey, because this is OHL Stories after all, where we're at when it comes to fighting. And I'm here to tell you that I was that guy 10 years or so ago, as the conversations were beginning to happen and they were clamping down, particularly in junior hockey, around fighting. I'm like, absolutely, get it out of the game. It's the only sport that allows it. This is stupid. This is barbaric. The sooner we get fighting out, the better. And I'm kind of starting to swing back the other way, simply because what we no longer have, and I think what we're all going to agree is a good thing, is that tough guy on tough guy fighting, the stage thing, the ones that are set up in advance, the players are ready to go, it's anticipated, and so on and so forth. But I do think that the stuff that kind of happens spontaneously through the game, I'm okay with it. I think that's something that actually adds value to the game. And I wonder, sometimes when we watch junior hockey, as much as I love it, Chris, and I've said that before, I'm a huge fan of this league. But boy, oh boy, sometimes I'd like to, like, you see a player go into the end boards, and the player coming in on the forecheck kind of peels off. It's a half hit, if it's any hit at all. I don't want to see guys get hurt, but gosh darn it, if I don't think we're missing a little bit of the physicality that we deserve in the game.
I think we are. And listen, I used to be very pro fighting, and I think we've kind of met in the middle a little bit. It definitely, to me, still has a spot in the game. I think, to be honest, the way the game's going, though, forwards are becoming smaller and faster and more skilled, and skill runs the game. So not a lot of teams have those guys at any level. So you're starting to see it go out. The guys like Brian Reeves and Tom Wilson are few and far between right now, but I think it still has a spot for sure.
So, reminder of how you can get in touch with us here on the OHL Stories podcast, because we're about to get to our guest. It's farwellandpope@gmail.com is the email address. On Twitter @_Chris Pope or @farwell_OHL. And if you're not already, I mean, you might be watching this as a video on our YouTube channel. Awesome. If you're just listening wherever you get your podcasts, also awesome. Leave us a review. Tell us what you think. Shoot us that email, farwellandpope@gmail.com, to let us know who you might want to hear on the podcast. But our YouTube channel as well, OHL Stories, has this and other content from our time around the Ontario Hockey League to kind of just give you another place to go for OHL content. So we hope to become that premier source of that content for you.
Yeah, make sure to check us out on all socials, as Mike said, Instagram, YouTube.
I always forget that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's more content coming, not just the silly little podcast, but please leave us a review and get in contact with us if you have any pointers.
I just want to say, before we introduce this next guest, how classy I thought it was after we had stopped recording and we just had a quick little chit chat. The first thing he wants to know is, how are you guys doing? I hate talking about myself. And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point of this. We want to hear your stories because you played in the OHL. He's like, how are you guys doing? What's going on? I'm like, you know what? That's a nice human connection. So to the guest you're about to hear, I appreciated that. It was nice just to talk and have somebody seem genuinely interested in what us lug nuts are up to.
Absolutely. And some great stories on and off the podcast from a guy that, at one point I probably wasn't a big fan of, because, I was playing junior in Guelph and knew a lot of the Storm guys, and Corey Locke did a number on a lot of OHL teams.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. When you talk about, the career he had in the OHL and just how dominant he was, there were a lot of OHL teams that weren't a fan of him. That's what happens when you have back-to-back 50-goal seasons, 151 points the one year, 118 the next. There's not a lot of teams that like you. But Corey Locke, back-to-back 50-goal seasons, back-to-back Red Tilson trophies for the league's most outstanding player, led the CHL in points. If you talk about the most dominant, most skilled players that have maybe ever played in this league, I think you have to mention a guy like Corey Locke, because he continued to put up points year in and year out, and everyone knew what he was going to do. Everyone knew this is the guy you got to center around, and it really didn't matter. Went on to play in the American League, won a Calder Cup with the Hamilton Bulldogs, played over 1,000 pro games, including 9 in the National Hockey League, played for 2 Original 6 teams, and now back in the OHL with the Guelph Storm, and a father. He had to go pick up his kids, so we let him go early.
One of the things he did say too, after our recording was finished, is we got to do this again. So get ready for Corey Locke part 2 at some point, because I think there's more to share from Mr. Locke.
Man, how life's changes, eh, Corey? Now you're worried about picking the kids up from school. Not too long ago, you were probably worried about where the next goal was coming from. First of all, we just talked off camera about picking those kids up from school. How's fatherhood?
Oh, amazing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And yeah, fatherhood's amazing. Definitely changes your life. I have a 9-year-old daughter. She's fantastic. She's in the 4th grade, and she's seen a lot of the world. She was in 14 countries by age 6. So welcome to the hockey life, and bouncing around and trying to extend a career in Europe. And but she got to experience a lot of experiences that not a lot of other kids have, and she's pretty happy to be home in one place and putting down some roots and stuff like that. So she's great, and thanks for asking.
I was thinking about that very thing, Corey, and obviously there's lots to talk about with the travels that you've had in hockey, but here you are back in the Ontario Hockey League now as a coach, obviously, and not too far from where you grew up in Newmarket. Is that any sense of full circle for you at this point?
Big time, for sure. I always knew after I was done playing hockey, I wanted to stay in the game somehow. I had such an amazing time when I was in junior hockey in Ottawa and playing in the OHL, that I knew that I'd want to come back and be involved at some capacity. And I'm lucky to have the opportunity, because I know a lot of ex-players and a lot of good people, a lot of good coaches want to be involved in the OHL and in the game. And I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to do that.
While you were playing, Corey, you picked up the Bachelor of Science in Management at University of Phoenix. How important was it for you during your playing career to still think about life after hockey?
Yeah, it was huge. My mom and dad were both high school teachers, both retired after 30 years of teaching, and school was always important to them, keeping my grades up and making sure that didn't slide. And when I was making the decision to play in Ottawa or go on a pursue, a scholarship in the NCAA, my parents wanted to make sure that I was, taken care of with the school package and stuff like that. And I knew my mom wanted me to take some classes in Ottawa when I was playing there, and it was kind of a little bit more difficult to do that. But I knew that when I was playing pro, after a few years in, about 4 or 5 years in, I knew that I needed to make sure I had something to fall back on, and I was lucky enough that since I played in the NHL there at the time, there was a package that you could apply for a scholarship through the University of Phoenix online. And I don't think many players at the time, one knew about it or wanted to do it. And I think people shied away from it because it was online and everything like that. And, now, 15 years later or whatever, I think everything's done online now in schooling, and maybe they were ahead of their time. So it was important for me to get that done. And pretty proud of the accomplishment to be able to do it while I was playing professionally hockey for all those years. But I know my mom's probably more proud of me for getting that done than maybe the stuff I accomplished while I was playing hockey.
You talk about that time with the Ottawa 67s. You're playing for Brian Kilrea. Now here you are back in the Ontario Hockey League, part of the Guelph Storm organization with George Burnett, a couple of the biggest names in coaching in the Ontario Hockey League. But I want to take it in a slightly different direction. Brian Kilrea and George Burnett walk into a bar. They exchange words. They have to take it out to the parking lot. Who's walking back in?
No comment. I don't know how to answer that one.
Neither of them.
Neither of them. Neither of them. Both, to be honest, both legends of the game of hockey, and of course in the OHL. I was really fortunate to play with, play for Brian Kilrea. It was just his 87th birthday, and I remember when I was there, it was his 67th. So 20 years later, kind of time flies and stuff like that. But playing for Brian taught you how to be a pro when you were 16, 17, 18, 19. Really treated you like a professional, or wanted you to get on to the next chapter of your life, and getting you prepared for that. He was a motivator. He knew what buttons to push with me for sure, and to keep me fired up and always trying to achieve my best. So I have great praise for Brian Kilrea and what he did for me, both on and off the ice. I still stay in touch with him sporadically here, and he's a great man, and I owe a lot to him. And now getting the opportunity to work for George, it's amazing what he's done too. Very similar path to Brian, where spent the majority of his time in the OHL and developing, the next generation of NHLers is what he's done. And, George is continuing to do that now. He's a coach that, demands from the players, but is really fair. And, he's obviously adapting. Now there's a new style of game. There's a new way of doing things through development and skill and all that kind of stuff that he's, totally on board for, which is, just shows how, you have to adapt as you continue to stay in this game. And I think he's done a great job at that.
Back to Killer just for a second. I'm sure it won't just be for a second. Who am I kidding? It's Killer. You joined the 67s after a year with Newmarket, put up almost 2 points a game in Newmarket. You walk into that rink and it's Killer. What is it like the first meeting with a guy like that?
Well, I met with Brian. I went down the drafts. I'll go back a little bit. The draft still happened like live when I got drafted, and I was torn between going to NCAA or going to the OHL, and made the decision that I was going to play a year in Newmarket, and my agent at the time let the teams know, and so I went to the draft to support my teammates, and I wasn't dressed like everyone else. Everyone else was wearing shirt and tie, and I kind of showed up in a golf shirt and maybe pants or shorts or something, but I was there to support my teammates because I thought I wasn't going to get drafted after making this decision. And I did get drafted and had to go down to the table and meet Brian Kilrea. And the first thing he said was, "Love your outfit." So I don't know. I don't know if it was sarcastic or what, but that was my first impression. He did a visit at the house, and they respected the decision that I wanted to play, a year junior and go about that. And during that year, I kind of visited some schools, and my dad took me down. And Ottawa at the end of my year in junior was like, "Well, we know you've gone down to visit there. Why don't you come and visit us in Ottawa and see the rink and see where you would live if you came to Ottawa with your billets and the school you go to and stuff like that." So I remember stepping into that rink and meeting Brian and watching a game, and kind of going down to the coach's room after the game and seeing how well respected Brian was, and the following that he had and stuff like that. So I kind of knew after I went to that visit to Ottawa that I was kind of meant to play there.
How did you find that transition into the OHL? When we look strictly at the points, Corey, it seems like the game was kind of easy to you, but how did you find the transition?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. I think the year of playing junior A really helped me, to be honest with you. I started, if I recall, I would have started on the third or fourth line, and by the end of the year, I was on the top line. But I was playing against 20-year-olds. I was playing good minutes. I was developing. That helped, right? And I think if I went to Ottawa that year, which I could have as a 16-year-old, still the way the draft worked out. They went to the Memorial Cup that year. I don't think I would have played many minutes. I was probably in and out of the lineup. Looking back on it, it was definitely a good year for me, a right move and for my development. So then stepping into the OHL, I think just a year later, instead of 16 and 17 and playing against 20-year-olds and doing the bus trips and all those kind of things that you don't get in minor hockey. It kind of helped me for junior and for major junior. And it was still a transition. I stepped in and, I played right away, and I was playing, and, 6 games in, I separate my shoulder, and I was out for, 6-7 weeks with a separated shoulder and cracked collarbone. So, as prepared as you are, or, how good the year is before, anything can kind of happen within your first year in the OHL.
Corey, we had Kilrea on this podcast, and it was amazing. I think honestly, we went probably an hour and a half, and it was just, I think we asked 10 questions. Like, Kilrea was just diving into story after story, recalling names. Yours was one of them. But he talked about his coaching style and how he would, if there was someone he really wanted to, send a message to in the room during an intermission or whatever, it would always be like the third person. He'd go after the first 2 guys, just like a haha. And then the third person was the one that he really wanted to send a message to. Do you remember any intermission speech by Kilrea, or a pregame speech, or anything in the room that stands out when you think of him as a coach? Because obviously in the room, he was made people laugh, but he was also pretty straightforward.
Yeah, he was straightforward. He didn't he didn't sugarcoat anything, that's for sure. He also, what I learned as you get older, like if he was hard on you and he yelled at you and he was pushing you and stuff like that, he liked you. If he didn't say a word to you or nothing, I don't mean it this way, but he didn't have as much time for you. Like you could tell that this was his way of motivating you and staying on top of you and pushing you. And we had some good teams there, and we had some nights where things might have been easier than usual, and he stayed as hard on us in those nights as any coach would. You know what I mean? To make sure that we were diligent on the habits and making sure that we executed properly. But I do remember, I tell a story. I went up in my 3rd year to his office before practice. The boys wanted to eat at a different place when we stopped at Belleville, because we would go to a lot of the times we play Friday night and bus down to Belleville and eat the next day and go on and stuff like that. And the boys wanted to eat, I believe, at a Eastside Mario's or something like that instead of another restaurant. And I went up and asked, and Brian said, "Yeah, whatever the boys want, yeah, we'll do that, no problem." It was a really civil conversation. He was really nice about it. I knew that the place where he liked to eat, and that's why we ate there. But he said yes to the boys. I go down, I put my skates on, my equipment on, and he always started the practice with on the whistle, you take off and you skate, and on the next whistle you slow it down. And first whistle goes, I take off. Second whistle goes, stops, and just yells at me for a good 30 seconds about how that wasn't hard enough. And then he blew the whistle. We started again, and stopped again and blew how hard I wasn't skating. And I think it was pretty much from going up into the office and trying to stick up for my teammates. And I don't think he liked that. I think he wanted to eat at his restaurant. So he let me know right about 30 minutes later. And I thought we had a nice civil conversation. Everything was worked out, but I guess he got the last laugh that day. So,
is it the last thing you ever asked for?
Yeah.
On that side of things, yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I didn't think it was such a big deal. The boys just wanted to eat at a different restaurant, So.
How bad was the Anne Murray and cigars on the bus?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that, because I was when I was in Guelph this week when it was Brian's birthday, and George Burnett was trying to call him to wish him a happy birthday when I was in the office, so we both could say happy birthday to him. And we didn't get through at the time, and I was just telling him, he said things were a lot different back then. I said, yeah, and so I moved into my billet's house, and I'm getting ready to go on the first road trip down to Kingston or Belleville to play exhibition game. And she's like, "You got everything?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "You don't have much." And I'm like, "I don't really sleep on the bus. I'll be all right." And she's like, "Well, you need a blanket." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to sleep, so don't worry." She's like, the blanket's not for sleeping. She's like, "You got to put it over your head, because you're going to sit at the front of the bus where Brian sits and the other coaches and the trainers. And there's an odor that comes out all the time there, and you want to protect yourself so that you have some lungs for the game and stuff like that." So she was a veteran billet and knew how what happened, and she got me a blanket, and I'm forever grateful of that little tip by her. So, and then
That's a good billet right there.
Really good billet.
Absolutely. Speaking of things being different, Corey, one of your Red Tilson award-winning years was a year you put up 151 points. That was a CHL best. We don't see numbers like that in the league anymore, probably for a variety of reasons. But how do you look at the league that you're a part of today on a coaching staff versus the league that you played in 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's the game's different, right? Hockey's the same, but you know what I mean. Things change and trends change and stuff like that. And I played through a time where it was clutch and grab and bigger boys, and it was I think it was a lot more physical. There was definitely a lot of hits that aren't allowed anymore in the game. There was a lot more fights there. I think it was a different game right back then, and now I think it's a real speed game. Like if you didn't skate that well back when I played, you could get away with it by maybe fighting or being physical or being agitative and doing other things. Everyone needs to be able to skate now. Every team looks for skaters, and then you try to mold them into whatever role you want them to play on the team and stuff like that. So I was fortunate to put up a lot of points. I always say it. I played with great players. Great line mates, great teammates. Brian Kilrea put me in great situations to succeed, and I think you're going to see numbers like that eventually back in. The players now are way too skilled not put up these points, and with the amount of clutch and grab and that's out of the game and stuff like that, and the amount of power plays they are, I believe that someone will do it here pretty soon.
All right, Corey, you're 2 years older than me, so I knew who you were in your junior days. I was playing junior B at the time. I've waited 20 years to ask this.
I can't wait for this. I'm so excited.
Good or bad?
It's funny. It's funny. It's funny. That's
what did I do?
No. How many of that year you had 151? I think I'd pull it up here. 88 assists. How many of those came when you were on the bench?
Oh man, oh man.
I don't think many.
I'm just kidding.
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't think many.
Just two.
There was probably a few that were, second assist that, maybe someone got a stick on and stuff like that. And the score in Ottawa was awfully friendly, but I'm sure that happens in Kitchener and London and Kingston and everywhere else around the league too, right? So
I'm only kidding. That's just the talk amongst the people that were chasing you and could never catch you. And they're like, he's got to be getting some from the bench. Like, how is he putting up this many points?
I remember one of my best friends, and I grew up with him. Childhood friend is George Halkitis, and he's a Kitchener alumni, and obviously we played each other in the OHL finals back in 03. When you guys went on to win, Kitchener went on to win the Memorial Cup and OHL Championship, and I know there was a documentary of that season that went through, and in that documentary it says, maybe he was given a couple assists here and there. So I know the rumors, and I know the following year it was I do remember the following year, one year one of the game sheets said Locke from Locke and Locke, and I was like, everyone think that there's no way it stood, but it just didn't look good, right? So I think it all got sorted out and stuff like that.
Just having some fun is all.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a few here and there. It happens, right?
You mentioned teammates earlier, and I mean, we could probably spend an entire separate podcast talking about various guys that you played with, but particularly in junior, Matt Foy. This was a guy that the two of you were about as dynamic as it got in the Ontario Hockey League. What did he mean to you?
Oh, I've never had chemistry with anyone that I played with better than I did with Matt. Me and him had, it was just we worked so well off of each other. He was, I played center, he played right wing. It was an easy to find him, right? Centermans always have the tendency to go their forehands as much as I did use my backhand and stuff like that. Your tendency is always to look to the right side, and it's easier that way. he was just such a powerful skater and so fast that I could just lay pucks into areas and I knew where he was going. And, we just worked really well off each other. And I think the biggest thing too is that, we pushed each other. Like we pushed each other in practice. The whole year we're having a really good season, but we're pushing each other, right? Like at the same time, he scores, I want to score. He gets a couple points, I want to get a couple points. We pushed each other in a good competitive way. And we're kind of hard on each other. We made sure that, we demanded a lot of each other and things were good. And I just think it was kind of both of our styles just really fit in. And I think one of the biggest things that, as I turned pro and stuff, you get into these roles that, when I turned pro, I became more of a playmaker. When I was, in my first few years of pro, I was playing with, not as many skill guys as I was used to and stuff like that. And I had to go get the puck, and I had to go get the puck in areas where, I wasn't going to be a shooter and stuff like that. And I think my game kind of transitioned into more of a playmaker and stuff. And then but in junior and when I played with Matt and stuff like that, it didn't matter who got the goals that night. Like if you look at, our numbers, they're so similar that, he would score a few one night and I would get them the next night. And, then our line mate Scott Shepard would chip in and it didn't matter who got it, like, which is really different because now when you see, players play with guys, they say, oh, he's a playmaker, he's the shooter, and he's the grinder. And, they try to mix everything together, where when I played with Matt, it was, we didn't care who scored, who got the assist. We just wanted to contribute. And I think a lot of the times too, like, obviously Scott Shepard, he was an amazing, player as well. And, he had, I think, close to 100 points, and he gets, no one ever talks about him, and he was huge. He did a lot of the grunt work. He went to the front of the net. He created a lot of space, and, he's someone that, there's a lot of credit as well that doesn't get enough recognition at times.
You talk about that chemistry. You played over 1,000 pro games, and you still go back to Matt as the guy you had the most chemistry with.
Yeah.
What leads to that kind of chemistry? Is it just something that happens naturally, or is it something that happens in the room and you get to know the guy and then or is it just playing with him repeatedly?
I think it's got to click like early, to be honest. Like with chemistry, it's got to be there. Like you can work towards it and stuff like that. I think you can work with anyone, but with him, it kind of clicked right away. What happened when we started? One of our older players took a couple bad penalties in I remember in Barrie, and Brian was not too happy with that player and stuff like that. And he was my right winger at the time, and Matt played center, so he was. We played both up the middle together, and Brian had this idea of moving Matt to the right wing. And I remember the game in Brampton. I think Matt had something like 4 points, and I had 2 or 3, and our line mate had 2 or 3 as well. And then that was it. It just clicked. And then the chemistry was there initially, and then these things happen, right? Coaches make lineup moves and it sparks something and stuff like that. You don't know how long it will last. Maybe it lasts a couple games, maybe a couple weeks. Obviously with Matt, the chemistry kept building, and we got to know each other more, and kind of had that sixth sense of where he was going to be on the ice. And you get used to like the predictability of where your line mate's going to be, or where he wants the puck, or how he likes the puck. And we just fed off each other. And it started right away, but it grew and grew. And it would have been too bad he left the next after that year. It would have been a lot of fun the following year to kind of try to do it all over again. But I did get a chance to play with Matt again years later in Germany. So we played in Berlin together, and kind of came full circle. We got to win a championship with the Ice Baron in Berlin. Played together on a line and stuff like that. And when I came there, the guys kind of knew that we played together, and that was the big joke and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of came full circle, and we really enjoyed playing with each other. Obviously in junior, but got to do it again in pro, and kind of topped it off with that championship that we missed before Kitchener ended that goal that we had.
That must have felt great in this foreign land all those years later, but to be reunited with a guy like Matt.
Yeah, I was awesome. And Julian Talbot was part of the team too, that we played together with in Ottawa. So it was, 367s boys, and Vince Millette was our assistant coach, which was Brian Kilrea's long time assistant coach. So there's a big connection. Peter Lee was the general manager, famous Ottawa 67, obviously. So there was a big connection to the 67s in Berlin, and it was a neat atmosphere. And I'll remember those that time for many years to come.
Obviously, if people don't know, you were a forward, but do you remember Killer's rule for his defenseman when clearing the puck?
Yeah, you couldn't use your backhand.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, up the middle, and couldn't use your backhand.
Yeah.
Because I knew he'd yell at Brendan Bell every single day, because Brendan Bell would use his backhand and come right up the middle to us. But there's a concept that, right, like you would, like, there's, you never played through the middle of the ice back when I played. It always went to the wall, and then you would support, the centerman would come over and support, and the winger would come over and slash across. Like, that's the way the game was played. And now, obviously 20 years later, we're talking about not going up the backhand with you up the middle of the ice in your backhand, and now coaches are promoting it and to try to exit through the middle of the ice. So it's funny how the game and the trends change, right?
A guy that put up the kind of points you put up, and we're talking about these offensive exploits with Matt Foy and this and that, but that means when you went into a visiting barn, you were obviously the target of that team's game plan. Do you remember a guy that you really hated playing against?
I had we had some really good battles with Belleville, obviously. That year there was Matt Stajan, Cody McCormick, and Paymont. I forget his first name. And they were a line, and we played each other head to head all the time, and it got pretty intense and stuff like that, and that was quite the rivalry. I remember that. But I give Brian a lot of, Killer a lot of credit. Like, he would push me to play just as well as I played on Friday night in Belleville on that Saturday afternoon at 2:00. Like, there was no, hey, you're not gonna just play at home, with our fans and our atmosphere, and when I have the change and I can put you on, when I can make the matchups and make it a little bit easier on you. He made sure that I came to play when it was a Tuesday in Brampton with not very many fans there, and or it was a game in Kitchener with the sold out barn, and there was people in the stands watching, right? So I don't remember, Chris Newberry always comes to mind. I didn't play a ton against him, but a lot of pro against him, and he was just a guy that could do everything, and he was just a tough player to play against. But there's lots of them. There's lots. So.
You talk a lot about your relationship with Brian, and if I can ask just one last question on Killer.
Yeah.
He was a player's coach. You hear all these stories of former players still in contact with him, like yourself. There's that story of a player's father telling him, "I handed you a boy and you're giving me back a man. Thank you."
Yeah.
What is it about Killer that he's able to go into the room, be straightforward like he was, rip you apart during the game, but then still have the trust and the relationship with his players? And what was it about him that allowed him to do that?
Yeah, I think I grew up with some hard coaches in my minor hockey days. My dad never coached me. I had coaches that were all pretty hard on me all the time, and I kind of had the attitude where I was kind of like, "Oh, all right, you're saying this, I'll prove you wrong," or yeah, I'll go do it. Yeah, no problem. You like kind of one of those. So when it came to Brian, I kind of was used to it, but maybe not in the intensity that Brian brought. But I kind of knew that, we had some heated conversations, right? Obviously, and I didn't agree with him all the time, and he obviously didn't agree with my play all the time, right? But he knew the buttons to push, and I think he just demanded. I think he was just such a legend, really, that you knew if he was saying something, you listen, and he was there to try to make you better. And I did say that he yelled at people that had that he wanted to get more out of, but he cared for every single person he coached. Don't take that the wrong way of when I said that, but he cared for everyone in that dressing room and wanted everyone to succeed. But I think that you'd walk in, he had that presence, and you knew that, you listen and it was going to be his way, and or you weren't going to be able to do it. You weren't going to be around in Ottawa too long, and usually Brian would ship you somewhere to somewhere far, far away, like Sault Ste. Marie or Windsor or Owen Sound, somewhere far, far away.
We know that the reason that guys play this game, it's to win, it's to move from the level that we're talking about in the Ontario Hockey League into the National Hockey League and ultimately win there. But for a Toronto area kid, Corey, in all honesty, did it sting a little bit when it's Montreal calling your name at the draft?
No, I think I was just so relieved to get drafted, to be honest with you. One, I get drafted to like probably the most famous, obviously famous hockey organization in the world. You know what I mean? Maybe, up there in the sports world, right? And the history, the tradition. It was an honor. It's an honor to get drafted to any NHL club, right? And yeah, you look back and it didn't have much ties to Montreal. Toronto kid, no French background, stuff like that. So you look back and you wonder, now, but at the time you're just so thrilled that an NHL team took you and you're going to be part of. You're just one step closer to that ultimate dream that you had when you first put on skates at 5-6 years old. So no, it was a great day. I'm glad I got drafted, and that's all it was just exciting for me and my family, to be honest with you.
Do you have a different outfit, like no golf shirt and shorts that day, maybe?
No, I wore a suit that day. Yeah,
okay.
I wore a suit that day.
06-07 was a pretty magical year when you were with the Hamilton Bulldogs. I think it's fair to say I don't think many people expected you guys to win the Calder Cup heading into the playoffs, but then just a few games before that, you guys got a new goalie, and he's gone on to a decent career in the name of Carey Price. What was it like when he came in and started playing the way he was?
Yeah, he was okay. He was decent.
He was okay that playoffs, yeah.
No, I remember. So he came in. I did an interview with The Athletic, and they were asking me about it, and I remember he comes in and he plays a Friday night regular season game, plays again on Sunday, and I remember the Friday night it was a 5-on-3, and he made like 3 unbelievable like east-west backdoor saves, and I was like on the bench and looking, and that was incredible. Like, and my first thought was like, how did this guy lose in junior? First thought, I was like, how is he with us? Like, I don't get it. Like, if he's that good, like, and so he played really well the Friday night and played again the Sunday, and coaching staff started him, and kind of the story was that was it. He went on to be the MVP of the playoffs and the backbone of our team, and we just had huge confidence, like right from this, like honestly, right from that Friday night regular third last game of the season, the team was confident in him. And you're absolutely right. Like we were a good team, but we were in the middle of the pack. Rochester, it was Rochester and Manitoba who we played, and I forget the 4th team. Maybe there was the Marlies at that time that got in the playoffs, or Grand Rapids. But like the 3 of us played. We played Rochester in the first round, and then in the second round we played Manitoba, and like we played the exact same systems. Like it was the same, like, and we played so much against each other too that you knew what you were going to get. And it was a coin flip between there. And then kind of once you got out of that North Division and you got into the conference finals, we played Chicago and didn't see them much, and it was different. And Carey was so good, and it was kind of a storybook thing. And we weren't supposed to make it, but it's those things where you just gel at the right time. The chemistry between players takes off, and we had guys. The thing too about the AHL in that year, we split with Edmonton. So some guys were up and down with Edmonton, some guys were up and down Montreal. Both those teams didn't make the playoffs, so they sent guys back. So then you had a different lineup, and kind of just came together, and it was quite the experience, and it was pretty cool.
Can I hop in here real quick, Fraz? I just got asked, do you remember the Calder Cup party that you guys had? And do you remember what Carey wore to it?
Yeah, he wore like hunter. He was like going out on a hunting trip up north, or say, yeah, 100%. I think he only came with that from Spokane, or was it Spokane? He plays Spokane. That's where no, Tri-City.
Tri-City, yeah, the Americans, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's all he brought with him was this hunting gear, and I don't know if he knew he was coming to Hamilton and like a suburb of down Toronto, or I don't know if where he thought he was going, but he was he was unbelievable. He's a great person. He's I hope he's doing well now. Obviously he's asked for some help, and I'm sure he'll get through it and all that. But he's a great kid. He's gone on to do unbelievable things in his career, and I hope eventually one day he can lift that Stanley Cup that's so deserving for him.
When you look back, Corey, at the decision to leave North America, go over and play in Europe, you've talked about the number of stops and a great experience for your young child for sure, but it's got to be tough to say, I'm done over here, I'm going to go play over there. What was that process like for you at the time?
Yeah, I think it just got, I went over after 9 years in the AHL. So I gave it everything I could to make the NHL and become a regular. I was fortunate enough to play a handful of games and fulfill that dream as a child. That was my dream, and playing the NHL, and I did. And obviously when you dream about it as a kid, you dream as a career, and as long as possible. And it's tough to get into. It's a tough league. It's the best league in the world. It's not just Canadians, it's Americans. The Europeans are obviously coming into this league. They're so good now, and they've done a heck of a job developing over in their countries and stuff like that. So so after 9 years in North America, I was fortunate, and there's a veteran rule in the AHL, and you just kind of, sometimes your time runs out, right? And I could kind of see the writing on the wall, but at the same time, I was a little frustrated that the opportunity never came. And if you want to extend your career, you go to Europe, and you go and do that experience. And forever grateful that I had a 6-year experience over in Europe, and bouncing around some of those countries, and you met a lot of great people. You met a lot of obviously new cultures. You new teammates, new coaches, new different philosophies and stuff like that. So definitely helped me grow, and I'm glad I did it for sure.
Sorry, Popey, if I can just jump in there, because the follow up on, you did get to play in the NHL though. Tell us about the first game.
Yeah, I don't know if you know the story, but I got called up on. We had a 3-3 right after Christmas, 27th, 28th, 29th. And the 30th, we were busing down to Grand Rapids. So on the 30th, I get called up to Montreal. I get called up, and I have to go to New York City though. And it's right before New Year's in New York City. So I get on the plane. It's a 5:00 game on the 30th. Go to the airport, check in. Obviously, it's going to be really tight anyways, but they're trying to get me there and all this kind of stuff. I get on the plane. We sit on the runway. Get into New York. There's millions of people in the airport. It's like this husband and wife could see that I didn't know where to go to get the oversized baggage, all this kind of stuff. They helped me out. I get over there, and I'm like, I don't see my bags, my sticks, and she checks, and she goes, sorry, but your bag has your stuff still in Toronto. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't really know.
Oh.
I had to call Bob Gainey and be like, hey, my equipment didn't get put on the plane. Well, he was like, well, come over to Madison Square Garden and come over. So I go over, and so I watch the game from the press box up there, and then fly back to Montreal and stay a couple of days in Montreal, get sent back to Hamilton. So the next day, I get called up about a week later. And I go to the airport, and my bag is that Hamilton Bulldogs bag that's in red. It looks like it's an orange sticker. Like, it is priority. Everything has a priority thing on it. So it gets on. Then I get on the plane, and they're like, oh, it's delayed with fog. And I'm like, I'm going to miss another game. I'm not getting to Montreal. I'm like, can I get off the plane? I can get there. I can drive there. It's, 11 o'clock in the morning. I think I can get to Montreal if I drive. Finally, the plane takes off. I get to Montreal. I played a night game, and it was pretty cool because it was against Chicago, original six. So obviously, the teams didn't play too much against each other in the format at the time. So it was pretty cool to be in a traditional playing two traditional original six teams, and it was quite the atmosphere. I played some games in Montreal and through exhibition and stuff like that, so I knew the atmosphere. I knew what it was going to be like, the adrenaline and stuff, and it was a special night for sure.
Man, Montreal, your first NHL game, it's in Montreal. Then you play for New York. Did you play in MSG, I assume, in the games you played?
Exhibition, never
exhibition.
On the road and stuff.
And then the other team you played for is Ottawa, where you played your junior career. Where do you rank those? Like those are three iconic moments.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously Montreal, you get drafted by them, you want to play there. I got kind of got through that, and I did that. Then I went to another original six, and New York is New York, right? And Madison Square Garden. And I wish I played a regular season game there, but when I was called up, it was on a road trip and stuff like that, which is still, you get to play for another original six team. And then it kind of comes full circle with Ottawa. I was really excited when that kind of offer came in. I had a couple other offers from teams that year when I signed with Ottawa, and I just, the connection, and there's something, coming back to Ottawa, and I just felt that if any team would give me a chance, or it would be, kind of fit the storyline, it would be Ottawa. And I got my most games with Ottawa and stuff. I wish it was, obviously everyone wishes it was more, but it kind of came full circle. It was my billets got to see me play, and I forget the name, maybe it was the Canadian Tire Center at the time, but got to see me play in Ottawa, and kind of full circle kind of thing, which was really neat. So tough to rank up, to be honest with you. I put them 1A, 1B, 1C all together. So
I got to bring it back from these classic buildings in the show to the Ontario Hockey League. You mentioned those Belleville games on a Saturday earlier. So the Yardman, I'm thinking of these buildings in the East, Corey, that you would have seen. Peterborough, which has never changed. You would have been in the old Oshawa Arena. Was there a favorite or least favorite for you on the road?
Least favorite? Windsor was tough to go into. Windsor was tough, but you only did that once a year, right? Being from the East, so really it was one game, and you got through it and stuff like that. Just the small, grungy, low lights kind of thing. I love St. Mike's. I loved St. Mike's. I don't know why. It was small, but I loved it. I went to school there for 2 years when I was a kid, grade 9 and 10. So I was familiar with the rink and that campus, I guess, and stuff like that. So I always loved it. I loved, playing. I guess I just loved the atmosphere there, and knew things were going to happen really quickly in that building and stuff like that. And so I knew I could play in that little tight space. And I remember when I played at Binghamton, when I was in Ottawa's system, Binghamton's AHL team, it's a smaller ice surface than NHL, and I had some success in there. So I know I can play in smaller rinks, just I know things happen quickly. And, whenever there's a turnover, it's pretty much, if there's a turnover, you're going right to the net with pucks and stuff like that. There's a good chance there's going to be a scoring opportunity. But I really enjoyed playing in St. Mike's. It's funny, me and George were talking, the good old, he coached in Oshawa at the time, and that, I remember Sunday nights, 6:00, 6:05, going into Oshawa, and that was always a tough test. And I always enjoyed playing there, but that was always a tough game. And George had some good teams, and some mean players and some tough teams. And I liked St. Mike's. I always enjoyed St. Mike's. Ottawa is obviously, so familiar with, and I don't know if I didn't like any buildings, but a lot of them have been changed over, right, as you said.
Right.
So.
Well, we know punctuality is important to George, and it's important to us too. So we know you have fatherly duties to do. So thanks a lot for coming on. We'll let you go pick up your daughter from school.
Well, thanks very much. Appreciate this. This has been a lot of fun reminiscing about the OHL days, and like I said before, I owe a lot to Brian Kilrea for what he did for me when I was in Ottawa, and it's just it's nice to reminisce, and thanks for bringing back these memories.
We'll get you on for part 2 a little later. Get
Sure.
some more killer stories out of you. And
If you're late for those kids, they're going to have to wrap them in priority tape to make sure they get picked up next time.
For sure. My wife will not be too pleased with me. Sure.
All right. Get in the good books.
Thanks a lot, Corey.
Guys, appreciate you having me.